In this three-part series, we listen to Saint Faustina describing her dark night of the soul, when she experienced the spiritual trial of trials, where she journeyed from faith and consolation into doubt and despair, with various temptations from Satan, then to feeling completely abandoned by Jesus, and finally attaining a higher level of spiritual closeness to God. In this first episode, we listen to the time when Saint Faustina gains deeper knowledge of God and undergoes her initial trial and temptations. We read in paragraph 95. In the beginning, God lets himself be known as holiness, justice, goodness, that is to say, mercy. The soul does not come to know this all at once, but piecemeal, in flashes, that is to say, when God draws near. And this does not last for long, because the soul could not bear such light. During prayer, the soul experiences flashes of this light, which make it impossible to pray as before. Try as it may to force itself to pray as it did before, all is in vain. It becomes completely impossible for it to continue to pray as it did before it received this light. This light, which has touched the soul, is alive within it, and nothing can either quench or diminish it. This flash of the knowledge of God draws the soul and enkindles its love for Him. But this same flash at the same time allows the soul to know itself as it is. The soul sees its whole interior in a superior light, and it rises up alarmed and terrified. Still, it does not remain under the effect of terror, but it begins to purify itself, to humble and abase itself before the Lord. These lights become stronger and more frequent. The more the soul is crystallized, the more these lights penetrate it. However, if the soul has responded faithfully and courageously to these first graces, God fills it with His consolations and gives Himself to it in a perceptible manner. At certain moments, the soul, as it were, enters into intimacy with God and greatly rejoices in this. It believes that it has already reached the degree of perfection destined for it, because its defects and faults are asleep within it, and this makes it think that they no longer exist. Nothing seems difficult for it. It is ready for everything. It begins to plunge itself into God and taste the divine delights. It is carried along by grace and does not take account of the fact that the time of trial and testing may come. And in fact, this state does not last long. Other moments will soon come. I should add here, however, that the soul will respond more faithfully to divine grace if it has a well-informed confessor to whom it can confide everything. Trials sent by God to a soul which is particularly loved by Him. Temptations in darkness. Satan. The soul's love for God is still not such as God would have it. The soul suddenly loses the tangible perception of God's presence. Various defects and imperfections rise up within it, and it must fight them furiously. All her faults lift up their heads, but the soul's vigilance is great. The former awareness of the presence of God gives place to coldness and spiritual dryness. The soul has no taste for spiritual exercises. It cannot pray, either in the old way or in the manner in which it had just begun to pray. It struggles this way and that, but can find no satisfaction. God has hidden himself from it, and it can find no consolation in creatures, nor can any of these creatures find a way of consoling it. The soul craves passionately for God, but sees its own misery. It begins to sense God's justice. It seems to it that it has lost all the gifts that God had given it. Its mind is dimmed, and darkness fills it. Unspeakable torment begins. The soul tries to explain its state to the confessor, but it is not understood and is assailed by even greater unrest. Satan begins his work. Faith staggers under the impact. The struggle is fierce. The soul tries hard to cling to God by an act of will. With God's permission, Satan goes even further. Hope and love are put to the test. These temptations are terrible. God supports the soul in secret, so to speak. The soul is not aware of this, but otherwise it would be impossible to stand firm. And God knows very well how much He can allow to befall a soul. The soul is tempted to unbelief in respect to revealed truths and to insincerity toward the confessor. Satan says to it, "Look, no one understands you. Why speak about all this?" Words that terrify it sounds in its ears, and it seems to the soul that it is uttering these against God. It sees what it does not want to see. It hears what it does not want to hear. And oh, it is a terrible thing at times like these not to have an experienced confessor. The soul carries the whole burden alone. However, one should make every effort to find, if it is at all possible, a well-informed confessor. For the soul can collapse under the burden and come to the very edge of the precipice. All these trials are heavy and difficult. God does not send them to a soul which has not already been admitted to a deeper intimacy with Him, and which has not yet tasted the divine delights. Besides, in this God has His own plans, which for us are impenetrable. God often prepares the soul in this way for His future designs and great works. He wants to try it as pure gold is tried. But this is not yet the end of the testing. There is still the trial of trials, the complete abandonment of the soul by God. Jesus, I trust in you.